Okay, it's 3:15. We're talking immersive online television experiences. My name's Tom Wild. I'm the CEO of Ramp. Quick 5 seconds on Ramp. We are a next-generation video content management platform. We work with major media companies and enterprises on video search, video publishing, video recommendations, those kinds of technologies. We've got a great set of panelists here today, combination of service providers and actual content producers and distributors. Starting right here to my left, Chris Ike, Manager of Digital Media Product Strategy for Disney ABC Television. Jerry Field, VP of Technology and Distribution at American Public Television back in Boston. And Tyler Winton, Senior Director of Client Services at Digital Smiths, which is a TiVo company. And I'll let these guys each sort of talk about their roles at their respective organizations. Obviously, you've most likely heard about all three of these organizations, and then we'll kind of get into this very interesting, very relevant agenda for the television landscape of today. So, Chris, you want to start?
Sure. My name's Chris Ike. I work for the Walt Disney Company. I work specifically under the media arm. So we encompass a broadcast network, which is ABC, and we have a portfolio of different types of cable networks, which include our kids programming, our family programming. We have ABC News, and we have 8 owned television stations across the country. We have 240 affiliates total. And what we essentially do is we are creating the next generation TV product. Our infamous portfolio for our current offering is called Watch, so you can get Watch ABC, Watch Disney Channel, and a bunch of others that we're developing as well. We have those on multiple devices, including smartphones, tablets, where we've adopted across iOS and Android, and we're also growing on over-the-top. So we're basically trying to figure out how to make television smarter, and as well as these new businesses are sort of evolving, making sure that we're relevant and we're there.
Great. Jerry.
Jerry Field. I'm Vice President of Technology and Distribution Services for American Public Television, and we are Boston-based. We're a company that started 50 years ago as the Eastern Educational Television Network. And those of you, if you have any knowledge of the Northeast at that point anyway, we're one of the first organizations to actually start exchanging programming among educational stations actually prior to PBS. And a number of different programs have come through our organization, going back to the original Mr. Rogers programs, Julia Child, the Three Tenors. I'm very happy to say that our company brought Monty Python to the United States television, so that's always good. But 50 years later, we're doing a number of other things. We're the largest syndicator and distributor of programming outside of PBS to public television stations in the country. And we have about 300 program offers a year, and we distribute to 350 plus public television stations. And in addition, we also, because of the work that we do, largely is curation and gathering. So we're looking at probably a stable of about 300 plus suppliers of programming, everything from very large companies to individual producers. We also bring programming in from overseas markets, and we represent the programming that we distribute actually and distribute those programs as well to a number of different international territories. So we're doing a lot of different work. We're a very small company with 30 people. We do a lot with a little. And we're also, and somewhere along the line of what Chris is saying, is that over the time we've really needed to sort of look, as the business has changed, about what we can do to support the work that the public television stations are doing. Final part is that we have basically 2 stories. One of them is that we're a B2B company because we're providing to our core number of customers who are public television stations, we're selling them programming. But on the other side, we're also a B2C company. We're responsible for the Create channel, which is a multicast channel that's now nearly 10 years old. That is basically, we looked at the collection of programming. We have about 7,000 programs in our library and archive, and we took a look at our programming. We're very strong in do-it-yourself, cooking, travel, those kinds of things. So we decided to package that as a pass-through multicast channel for stations that we've been very successful with. We also have developed a companion national website with that channel, and the whole idea is that we're providing this as a service to stations as a turnkey. And we have about 110 licensees of the Create channel, and we're reaching about 80% of total television households. So So we're doing lots of different kinds of things and supporting all of that work in the areas that we'll be talking about.
I was going to say, don't steal your thunder. Tyler.
Tyler Winton, Digital Smiths, now part of TiVo. Digital Smiths is a company that's focused on really the problem of discovery. So in a world of multiple distribution, ever increasing choice for the consumer, new models being opened up in terms of distribution windows and platforms and channels and modalities, our mission is to connect viewers with personally relevant content as quickly as possible. We do this for leading television service providers, connected device makers, networks, and studios. Today, we are powering discovery experiences in over 19 million households. So as a point of reference, there's 100 million pay TV subscriptions in the United States right now. So almost 1 in 5 of those. That number increased 30% from last quarter to current quarter. So we have a huge footprint domestically and really looking in 2015 to continue that growth plan. We're really in the early stages with a number of key customers. So it's just getting started for us. We got acquired by TiVo in January of this year. Feels like it's been a while. Privately funded, raised venture back in 2008. So it's been a great ride so far, and looking forward to participating on the panel today.
Great. Well, why don't I set the table a little bit here for our conversation, because it's very multifaceted in terms of what does it mean to be immersive in the television world. And I remember 3 or 4 years ago did a similar panel and highlighted the need to think about these things. Well, the reality is now they're here, and so this is kind of certainly a fun time in the market. I don't know if you've noticed some of the announcements for The Simpsons world as an example with FX, the largest online syndication deal ever done. They're putting all 520 episodes of The Simpsons up online, right? And so this is sort of the dawn of all of this, unlimited shelf space for content that the web brings to the table. But there's a lot of complexity facing content producers and publishers. You've got a multi-format world. Jerry touched on the fact that they're not just delivering a television show, they're delivering a website with the television show. You've got text, audio, video, images that have to be sort of wrapped with any television asset now. You've got, obviously, web, mobile, over-the-top devices like Roku, the Xbox. You've got a set of consumers that are in control, right? So the consumers now are saying when, where, and how they're going to watch the programming. They're recommending this programming to their friends. They're not necessarily using strictly the electronic program guide of yesterday. So how does that discovery model change? And then finally, a lot of business model complexity, a lot of experimentation. What is the business model that's going to win? Is it pay-per-view? Is it subscription? Is it things like iTunes? So a pretty fascinating set of stuff to do if you are in the television industry today. So I thought we'd kind of dig into this and talk about some of the approaches that these folks have taken and their learnings as recommendations for how you all might be thinking about this going forward. So Jerry, maybe starting with the point you made, how have things changed? I wanted to kind of explore the notion that you're delivering not just a television program, but other assets with it. How have things changed if you're either a content producer or in your case, sort of a producer/distributor, in terms of the expectations of your customers, of the endpoints that are going to play out this content?
Right. I think that I'll take create as the model in this because I think it's probably the clearest one. We have a real advantage of having a 24/7 linear channel out there as the core of this, and that is a core business. So we have to be looking at what we're doing to support that. I think that all the television stations are also, starting from the way that Create started, stations had the capacity to add a multicast channel and they wanted to put something on it, so we gave that to them. But then what? And how do you wind up building and creating an audience for this? The interesting thing about Create actually is that demographically, it skews much younger than most public television audiences, so that also got some real attention from a number of stations. And so the idea about looking at, then the requests started coming in too, saying about what else can we do to help promote. And the website had been there as just sort of a basic sort of placeholder at the very beginning years of this, but then we started looking at the idea about co-branding the national website, by IP or by zip code, so that the local brand of a local station would show up, customizing the website so that when somebody shows a local station, the local schedule would be there. And then also then adding features to that and really trying to work the idea of we have the advantage of the linear channel is that every half hour we can make a pitch to createtv.com. So we're driving traffic over to the Create website, hopefully introducing people through the website to some new programs that they may not have seen, and being able to get engagement going that way. And then also the idea is through use of social media, we're providing a lot of seeding of discussion on Twitter and Facebook primarily, to be able to, again, try to lift visibility of the programs, lift visibility for the stations too. I mean, the stations ultimately are our clients, so we're trying to help them out.
So literally every television program, maybe even every episode, is sort of wrapped with this, not only other content experience, but even this little community that you're trying to foster to drive that.
The arts and crafts programs on Create particularly are really a very interesting group, because they're a smaller number in the total schedule of the channel, but they have very, very, very involved and very vocal fans. So we've been able to find some ways to be able to use all of what I mentioned, I think, to help build that community as well.
Chris, are we at a point where television programs or television stations, are they applications now? Is that sort of early, middle, late in the game, and how do you guys think about that at ABC?
Yeah, it's funny because when we're an old media company. Specifically, I'll talk about ABC, and we create content and we put it on the television set, which is basically, if you think about it, it's kind of a dumb giant monitor that sits in your living room. And now with these new sort of interactive technologies, the tablets, the PCs, and we're sort of finding ways that, okay, we just can't deliver content. Now we have to create new experiences around this content. And it's very interesting to think about how we're not just a content company now, but we're also a context company. And now we have to figure out ways to sort of use deeper metadata to sort of drive that context and to drive a more richer experience. And with these new technologies, we found that the old model of turning on your TV, watching a linear channel, sort of just leaning back in the consumer, just being told what to watch and when to watch. Now that they're leaning forward, we need to figure out ways to sort of drive that discovery in all of sort of the fragmentation of all these new video channels that are emerging. So it's very important for us to have sort of that deep, rich metadata, even from a broadcast network, to make sure that we're able to be relevant in that field.
Tyler, on the discovery front, the way I've always thought about it is, originally you had electronic program guides, or even the TV guide, which is sort of the browse metaphor. Then you had search, which is I find the content, and now you have recommendations, which is the content finds me. Where do you think we are on that continuum right now in terms of sort of the next generation of findability with video content?
It's a good question. I think there's, the goal is to create multiple modalities that can appeal to people who just may have different personalities, different inherent ways they view content. And so a lot of the initial work was very much designed around people who know where they want to watch and what they want to watch, because the amount of choice was much less prevalent, and so much more limited to a linear schedule. And now it's been, all right, a lot of push models and recommendations, really passive models, like, you're right, you should know me, you should know what I want to watch, and just push it to me. I still think there's a middle ground there that involves, people who have some interests, but they've got a lot of options. And so the middle ground is one that provides more of maybe a managed browsing type of model, or a faceted browsing type of model, where you're giving people the tools to make choices. So an example of that might be mood, which gets talked about a lot. Someone sitting down on Friday night, and they may say, man, it's been a long week. I really just want to see something that's going to make me laugh. I want a comedy movie. I'm feeling kind of nostalgic, one from the 80s perhaps, and something from a former SNL cast member. And so providing kind of that level of discovery, I think, is something that, if you've got good metadata across your library of content, you can enable fairly easily and make a really rewarding experience. That's the area where I think there's probably been the least investment as different subscription packages and models have built up. Like you can't do that on a Roku, you can't do that on Netflix, you can't do that on Comcast X1. They're trying to bridge some of those gaps by creating some more specific tailored buckets of content. And so, maybe there's going to be an intelligent way to actually do that and provide more nuanced views through viewer measurement and viewing viewer behavior patterns. But I also think there's opportunity to make that experience, provide that middle ground for the person who knows generally kind of what they want, but they don't know what's available to them where, through what service.
Yeah, did you have a point, Chris?
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to add. I mentioned that we're a content company, but we're not just about enriching metadata around video. One example is with our daytime show, The Chew. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone's ever watched it on ABC. Raise of hands if anyone's seen The Chew. Okay,
admit it.
It's a cooking show, and on ABC.com we actually host all the recipes. Well, we had a discovery issue where consumers were coming to our sites wanting to get a recipe that they saw on air, and they had a difficult time finding it. So we actually partnered with a company called Ramp. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, and used their MetaQ technology to essentially create a filter on abc.com, so when the consumer goes, they can easily index and find the different recipes that they're looking for using a basic filter functionality.
Right, so really connecting what was happening on the television program to an action that the users were wanting to take, and you guys discovered that by looking at the search logs and found that, oh my gosh, people immediately following the show were coming to abc.com to search for recipes, and if you're planning on building out abc.com, you probably wouldn't, I wouldn't have thought that, okay, we got to factor in recipe search here, we're a television station, but an interesting connection between the television and the web experience. Mm-hmm. Jerry, in terms of let's talk about discovery from sort of a content producer standpoint a little bit. In the old days, linear television, you just had to make sure people knew which channel was X, right? It's channel 5. Right. But now you produce this piece of content and it goes off into the wild. It may live, on some Xbox lineup, or could live on a Fios VOD lineup, or broadcast on a public television channel, one of 800, right, on a cable network. So how do you guys think about findability? What do you do to enhance that, give that piece of content the best chance of being discovered out on all these different use cases?
Sure. I mean, it goes back to the knitting for us too, because the majority of the programs that we distribute as a syndicator don't have a set time and date on the national schedule either. So we're sort of very used to the idea that our programs are all over the map.
Right.
And working our relationships with the stations to do local promotion, of course, is an important part of that. But we spend a fair amount of time with SEO still, because Google search is actually a pretty important thing for us. And then also, it's one of the real advantages about social media as well. If we can get conversations going, in a couple of different panels, people have talked about this, about the idea about having conversations going and sort of lifting that and then being given the opportunity to connect to the program. So I mean, it's an ongoing challenge, but the kinds of things that we do, and then the idea again about trying to build engagement and being able to direct from a linear and a broadcast experience back to a web experience, and then keeping people there, giving them reasons to want to stay, and that's again the same kind of thing that we've done, similar to. What Chris was saying, we have a lot of cooking shows. We have real cooking shows with real cooks who cook, not compete. And as a result, we have a lot of people also very interested in recipes. We have a lot of travel shows, and what we've done is a fair amount of work on travel, working with another client of a certain company called Ramp, helping us with being able to have searchable videos online and being able to collect, be able to help follow people's interest towards additional content. And then context, Chris's point about context is an important part about it too. We do it with travel quite a bit, so that not only do you see a piece of video about a certain location, but it may also link to Google Maps, other kinds of events. As the video is going, additional content is coming up to help you fill in the context of where am I, what is this all about. So
context is an interesting one. If we were talking about this panel 2 years ago, we would all be talking about the second screen, right? And there were 10 startups trying to do second screen, and it was a really hot space. So maybe both Chris and Tyler, I'll start with you, Tyler. What happened there? Why not? Why didn't it work? And what took its place?
That's a great question. I think the second screen isn't necessarily dead, but there was a lot of venture capital money flowing into a lot of companies who had a lot of stars in their eyes. And I think, one of the things around the second screen is it's interactive, so there may be some opportunities there. But there's been a lot of experimentation with a lot of different business models. I wouldn't say it's dead, but I think the costs to execute on a lot of those models was maybe higher than anticipated. I think people have learned a lot in terms of what needs to happen. And one of the big things is you really do have to be methodical, and I think you have to have a large vision. And I think what happened initially was there was a lot of fragmented efforts going on where people would create something that was maybe specific for a product and not designed to last and be sustainable. And so a lot of things fell by the wayside. I remember a lot of the initial, people would talk about the Game of Thrones app as the example of a great second screen experience that was really well done. And I assume that app is still out there. I don't have a copy of it, but I think things like that are important for the fan base of the show, and I don't consider the second screen dead at all. I just think the conversation is, going back to Chris's original comment, is moving more towards interactive television, and it's not something that needs to be limited to a tablet app. It doesn't necessarily need to be a secondary experience. So I think, the name itself I don't really like because it's kind of just confers second-class citizen status on interactive viewing. And I think when you look at the increased amount of time-shifted viewing, on-demand viewing, it's clear that people are more comfortable watching outside of a broadcast window. And I think as such, there also is going to be increasing comfort in pausing what they're doing or watching within the context of perhaps a shopping experience or a informational experience, a data retrieval experience, an electronic sell-through experience, a social experience. I still very much believe all of those things are going to happen and will happen. But I think there was a phase of intense experimentation, a lot of learnings that have been internalized, and I think there's a second wave coming that's going to be probably more focused on a really narrower set of use cases and problems to solve.
Yeah, Chris, you guys have always, from as a sort of partner and observer, Albert Chang seems to be very willing to sort of fail fast on some of these things and try it and see what sticks. So what did you guys learn with some of your sort of second screen interactive experiences? Because I know you tried several. Yeah,
it's interesting because we have developed a couple different second screen apps. Every year we do something with the Oscars, and we actually do find higher engagement with something like live programming. However, we've also done scripted dramas. Grey's Anatomy, we did a sync app. And we, at the time, 2 years ago, when we were looking at sort of formulating a product strategy around our watch and a second screen, what we found is that the market was saying that people are actually using tablets, smartphones, computers while they're watching television. However, the disconnect was that what they were doing was not essentially related to the programming. So it was things like checking email, browsing social media. It was communicating and texting friends. And we actually found there was a very, very small market size opportunity for people that were engaging in related programming activities. Today, I actually read something published by eMarketer that stated that number of actually engaging within programming on a second device has actually gone up. It's somewhere around 15% based on the study that they put together. So it actually is growing. It's not dead. It's becoming alive. And as programmers and broadcasters are thinking about how to invest in the future, second screen is definitely something that they want to use to capture their audience's attention and sort of keep them engaged, and of course keep the advertiser engaged as well. And those sort of things involve sort of looking at our programming on a deeper contextual level, including metadata, looking at things like when characters appear, right? A very basic use case could be that a character shows up within an episode. Hey, I've seen that person before. An IMDb link pops up, and then you could go and you could essentially look on your second screen. You can be doing something related to that. Or it could be surfacing content. It could be surfacing recipes. So it's essentially getting that deeper metadata on a scene-by-scene level and making sure that it's being invested in for the future of second screen.
Yeah, I always felt like, second screen did arrive, and it was called Twitter.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
on that topic, Facebook and Twitter and immersive television, I mean, they're sort of the Gulf Stream of content, right? Jerry, what role does social play, and how proactive are you in trying to guide the social conversations around discovery and engagement with the content?
We're actually pretty active in it, including providing some support and some education for the suppliers of the programs as well, to get them to be active in it as well. I mean, we dabbled initially a couple of different times at the idea of apps, but we didn't really have the resources or really the compelling case, I think, to really develop them. What we've done actually, and more so, is really, and I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about this, but the idea about really paying a lot of attention to having responsive design for our websites, and being able to have it so that if we did have people land on our websites through that search or whatever, they could see it on any device. And making sure that any video that we had on there was going to play well with that as well. But the social is really very important, because again, the idea that we have a whole collection of a lot of niche programs with real, dedicated viewers, and really trying to seed those conversations again and get those to work. Really sort of it helps, and it's proven, I think, that it's brought a new audience to some of the shows as well.
Chris, I know I saw the producer of Scandal speak at a second screen television event. It was pretty fascinating to hear how they use hashtags to engage the audience on a sort of episode by episode basis. How much of that is sort of centrally planned? Is that more sort of now the standard with your content producers across the different programs? What role does that play in sort of product strategy?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So Scandal is one of the highest tweeted shows on television today. I'm not sure if it's exactly #1, but it's held #1 for a short while, and it's been in the top as well. It's definitely something that they've noticed the consumer behavior happening. People are tweeting about it, using hashtags. Then, of course, the network then being responsive and sort of putting out there and sort of engaging the conversation. One thing that we've done within our first screen, which would be our watch product, is essentially enabled social media to occur within app experience without the consumer then abandoning. So essentially they could be watching Scandal, they could open a tab on that same first screen, engage in a tweet, read a couple tweets related to a hashtag, and then go back to viewing. So it's sort of that immersive experience that we want to make sure that, even though it's on Twitter's platform, that we're not sort of losing customers because of that, second screen or ancillary activity.
Tyler, in terms of recommendations, what role is the social graph playing now? Is that something that you guys are actively now using as a sort of a data source to model recommendations around?
Yeah, we're always looking for a wealth of data. So, we work with networks to generate richer data. We look at social media. We look at actual consumption patterns. It's like can't sit on a panel without some representatives from ABC without bringing up Nielsen, right? But given, I would say, just a lot of the long-standing challenges around traditional measurement metrics and how they can be applied to new viewing modalities, I'd say, Twitter's and Facebook are very important factors. For us, we have the ability to blend these things in. For a long time, we've been really interested in the fact just that, there's so much divergence actually between what you'll see in terms of TV popularity is measured by Twitter versus measured by Nielsen, and of course very specific demographic for Twitter, whereas Nielsen will say they have a much broader purview. But now a lot of that's kind of thrown into question, and so for a long time, our methodology and philosophy has been we're fairly agnostic and really look to get a breadth of data to apply to these problems, because relying on a single source is a single point of failure for you and can create real blind spots. It's scary to think about an over-reliance on a single source and what that might do to very important decisions like programming pickups. There's certainly things we see in data that we observe that has us questioning a lot about the measurement that's happening today and how reflective that is of the true audience of programming.
Right. Switching gears a little bit, the sort of community or viewer involvement, I think the Simpsons is a pretty fascinating example where the fan base for The Simpsons is probably indexes as high as any in terms of fan involvement with the show. But what they did was went out, and there are many Simpsons wikis out there that have these exhaustive catalogs of every episode, every piece of trivia, cross representations. And they brought a lot of that data into the experience so that underneath all these episodes is this incredible amount of data, not only the script and descriptions and the dialogue, but all of these cross-references and trivia about, where was Sideshow Bob, when he found his dog and all this crazy stuff. So is that something increasingly that, sort of connecting to the audience in a very real way that is going to be sort of mandatory when you're thinking about programming, Jerry? When you talk a little bit more about the website, maybe cooking is a good example where you watch a cooking show and you want to try the recipe or supply a recipe or rate the recipe. How does that affect you?
Right. And we're building more of that out. And the other part of it too is that while we are non-commercial and educational television, there are products involved. So it's also the idea about giving a shopping opportunity too. I mean, we're integrated with, as we are with many things, with Shop PBS and many of the other PBS and system-wide resources as well. And we do promote those through the programs and try to build that up. But in terms of the recipes, we've actually had, I would say, we've had some difficulty, but I think significant progress over the last year or so with trying to get the producers and the suppliers of the programs to really sort of engage with this more. I think that people tend to hold on to recipes pretty tightly, and we're trying to say, listen, the same way that there's an advantage for you to be able to put content online, there's also an advantage to put extended content online as well. I think Rick Steves is the European travel expert, and one of the top-rated shows that we have has really gotten it. I think he really understands that there's a real advantage for being able to put as many resources together with the shows as we can stitch. And the other part is I couldn't be talking about public television without talking about pledge programming, for better or worse. But we've done a couple of things there that have also been really very important, where we've actually taken something that's maybe a little bit not very popular with people, but actually very popular programming that does create eyeballs, and really try to be able to connect the programs with, again, a sort of a deeper relationship with the program themselves. Create also, we've done a lot of work with marathons, where on Saturdays and Sundays we have blocks and programs that we are out of the regular schedule, and there we're doing a lot also with like hashtags and other kinds of ways that we can just try to be able to bring more audience to us. So.
Yeah. Maybe looking into the future a little bit, we'll go down the line here. Give me some thoughts about 2015 and immersive television. What do you see coming up, Chris, in terms of things you guys are thinking about or trends you're seeing with consumer expectations?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when you mentioned The Simpsons using essentially crowdsourced data to sort of drive a content experience, I think it's very forward-looking to think about metadata not just being provided or contextualized by a programmer or a content creator, but thinking about the future of metadata as being sort of a platform or technology that allows open crowd to essentially create that data themselves. A prime example is Wikipedia. Facebook as well. I mean, essentially, if you think about what Facebook is it's essentially just a platform that without the people and without basically all of the context that's being applied to it through conversation, photos, other video content, it's really nothing. It's just essentially a standalone platform. So thinking about the future of metadata, I think that sort of the crowdsourced point of view is where there's going to be a lot of value and where you're going to see a lot of that lean in, and the viewer feeling like they're part of the experience as well because they're helping shape that contextually.
And maybe Lost was really the first great example of that, right? That
Absolutely.
sort of whole lore that built up around Lost, independent of what the producers were doing. And then the producers decided to try to maybe steer it a little bit, but not wreck it, not to interfere with it.
Yep, and Lost is a prime example where you had a very hardcore fan base, and all of these sites started coming up on the side where they were talking about theories of Lost, and they were all contributing, and it was really adding value just to the show itself, and the show was really not having to do much but just allow that sort of conversation to occur.
One of the things that's changed for us is that video on Facebook has become a lot more important for us, especially probably over the last 6 months, for exactly that reason. I mean, it's really where the communities are really sort of getting built, and to be able to add video there is actually bringing some real result back for us as well. I mean, we still have very much a presence on YouTube and every place else where we can put video, but I think that the Facebook video for us, particularly because of the audiences we have, are doing more there. You know, it's a tough one for me to be looking in the future, being primarily a company that supports broadcast television, you know, with everything else going on in the world. I think that the idea that, but for public television, I think that there's some sense that locally based stations are going to continue to operate one way or another. There is a lot more talk, and I think a lot of real engagement on for public television stations too, about having alternative ways to be able to distribute either through a network or you know, something in addition to over the air. I don't think over the air is going to go away. I think it's still going to have a pretty strong presence. It'll diminish. It's changed. It's going to keep on changing the way that it's been. We will have probably much more content that'll be available across platforms. And again, it's the idea of trying to get it easy for people to find the content and view it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Tyler, about 2015?
Yeah, I think there's, you know, there's going to be more examples like Trish's Scandal example, where social and Twitter in particular is such a powerful vehicle, get more seamlessly integrated into the experience. I also think there's a lot of opportunities around you know, more immersive experiences, and those will continue to be kind of invested in and pursued. The big thing I think about in terms of interactive, I go back to like where television viewing started to get more data oriented, and that's kind of, I think CNBC might have been the first example where they started throwing up a ticker across the bottom of the screen, and now if you look at any kind of sports network or news network, you see a lot of information being presented beyond just the moving pictures, right? There's tickers and sports scores and stats and game time and live look-ins to other places. So I think that's an area that's really ripe for exploration in terms of making it more interactive. And by that I mean, instead of having that stuff kind of flying by at the whim of a producer, giving users the option to select what they're pulling up and what they're interacting with. I think it's probably more of a 2016 thing to see come into kind of a primary screen, but I think that is certainly, I think that's certainly coming quickly.
Maybe the last topic before questions here, because we're getting close to the end here. YouTube, Jerry, maybe start with you. Any change in thinking about YouTube, do you think, across the industry right now? It's been this sort of, I don't know, love-hate's the right word, but certainly trepidation and you know, maybe not alignment with business models. But how do you guys think about YouTube?
I think, again, our current presence on YouTube is primarily promotional. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we're just about every program that we have, you know, we the standard 30-second promos for those shows or whatever, we wind up putting them on YouTube or continue to put them on YouTube and annotate those to be able to provide links back to us. And I think it's still very, very important. We're looking actually at, for a couple of things with Create about using YouTube for user-generated, for gathering user-generated video. Mm-hmm. One of the ideas that we have is, it goes into the general category of the chef next door. You know, we're looking for sort of like the next emerging chef and try to be able to do it through user-generated video. Mm-hmm. So that, you know, that's sort of the way that we're looking at it. And yeah, that's
Krista, how about ABC and YouTube? What's the?
Yeah, you know, we've had a long-standing deal with YouTube, and you know, like you mentioned, that it's essentially it's a great promotional vehicle. It allows us to get our content out there. I know that Jimmy Kimmel is an example of something that does very strong on there. And you know, we've looked at making progress at being able to take our ad inventory that we sell and carry it along using technology like Freewheel onto YouTube platform. But you know, essentially, it's just feeding into YouTube's ecosystem and building up their business, whereas, you know, essentially as a multi-billion-dollar media broadcaster, we want to make sure that we are making the right decisions to protect and grow our business in the right direction. And you know, there's definitely some challenges involved with YouTube in that aspect.
Good. Well, with a few minutes to go here, what questions for the esteemed panelists? Go ahead.
I have a question. You spoke a lot about, you know, enhancing the experience and making it better for the consumer, which is great for the consumer. What's the thoughts you know, nothing says advertising at the bottom or what. Do you see anything in the future? Because I don't see how money.
Yeah, how is advertising shifting?
My assumption is certainly that advertising plays a component in this. I think it's, you know, the costs of producing content are high. The cost of repackaging it based on data you can extract or by enhancing it with additional data are much lower. So you can kind of meet where the ad revenue is going. You also see digital ad revenue rapidly on a great growth curve. So I think, you know, those two kind of conflating trends, reduce costs to produce content in this manner and increase digital revenue, create some viable long-term models. Now, you know, the challenge I think continues to be that there's fragmentation and there's competition for those dollars, right? And so, you know, more people going after that space certainly, you know, create some challenges there. But I don't know. I don't think I would have told you a month ago that I thought CBS would be, you know, offering a streaming package for $6 a month of their library. And so, you know, I think the big question in my mind is, you know, distribution is changing inherently, and you know, there may be a lot of focus on that in the next 12 months more so than
I know as a
anything
viewer, I
else.
still scratch my head when, you know, you watch one of the television apps and you'll see the same ad like 6 times, you know, if you're watching a 50-minute show. The digital to linear, there still seems to be a pretty wide gulf between the two in terms of advertising. I mean, Chris, when does that not be looked at separately? You know, if I'm watching a show on a tablet on an app, why is that fundamentally different than when I'm watching it on my television? Is it different?
I mean, it
advertising.
is different because it's essentially sold differently, and you know, obviously there's a different way of measuring it from, you know, the old school model to sort of the digital model. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot less.
Is that
inventory.
necessary, or is that just sort of structural friction that exists? Is it needed, or is it just sort of it'll work itself out over time?
So I mean, it's a great question. It's definitely a challenge that we face as a business in making sure that we have, you know, not 6 ads playing within one experience as opposed to the traditional TV experience. And sometimes it's about, you know, meeting quota. Sometimes you have to, you have certain ads that you have to deliver by a certain time frame, and yeah. But it's definitely something as adoption grows and more advertisers are coming to the table, you know, it'll mean, you know, better ad experiences for the consumer.
And for us, it's a bit of a different play. The ROI for us isn't really directly with advertising, but it really is a thing about lift and carriage of the programs. A lot of times also helping to build the case for underwriters of programs as well, because the program is getting seen more. It's more, you know, you have real data too that you can wind up helping the producers with, and helping the producers produce new programs is helpful for us. So that's really where for us it's going. The other thing is, as far as the online presence too, I mean, we're part of a system that PBS has built called Cove that actually is a one-to-many video online environment for public television stations. Basically, PBS manages this, and the content within it can be plugged into websites with the local TV stations. If you're seeing video on your local public television station's website, it's probably coming through that system. And there are pre-rolls in that as well. So and there are some other opportunities for us on online as well to be able to have some other kind of either underwriting or even advertising support.
Cross-promotional advertising, yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions? That light's like right in my eyes. That's right.
That's the question my CFO is always asking me, though.
Just curious.
Where's the money?
How many people actually have at least one TV Everywhere app and use it once a month?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, definitely.
So good half of the people in the room. Okay.
Yeah, it's been we did a survey about a year ago of this question of, do you know what your TV Everywhere login is? And it was astonishingly low, but in just a year, it's come way up in terms of people knowing what that is. My kids certainly ping me for it all the time. What's the Fios login, or what's the Comcast login?
Yeah, I think Adobe recently released a statistic around TV Everywhere authentication rates going, I think, 7x over the past, like 9 months or some very short time frame. So it's pretty interesting to see how the market is starting to adopt more and more.
Any last questions? Go ahead.
Traditionally, broadcast television relied on viewership rating and share to drive rates and get revenue. immersive experience that I hear so much about, the last 3 days and in general, how do we continue to pull that revenue if viewers' attention is so divided among all the interactivity going on? How do we know between the hardware from TiVo and the Twitter and Facebook apps built into the program that they're watching?
Right, the mythical attention metric.
Yeah.
How do you guys think about it?
It's a great question. I don't know if I have the answer to it at all. I wouldn't pretend to have the answer to it. I mean, I think we're probably all in a situation of needing to, sort of be very aware and look deeply and try to see what the experiences are and try to aggregate those numbers. I think that the traditional broadcast ratings guys have had a challenge on that part as well, and trying to find a way to be able to get those numbers together in a meaningful way would be good.
Yeah. I mean, looking at like the dual revenue streams, right? On one side, subscription, that's the easier one. That's essentially retention for monthly subscribers, right? Keeping those retained, obviously. From the ad model, things definitely have to be more interactive and they have to be more engaging from how we bring the advertiser into the content experience, right? And as these new technologies are sort of emerging and behaviors are shifting, and we have to figure out how to evolve that, not just us, but as an industry.
I think there's kind of an irony in that Mr. Hughes' channel, which I watch over the air, is kind of reverting back. There's a strong, what I sense is a strong viewership because it's more basic.
Right.
From this kind of derogatory term, I guess, but they want that immersive programming experience as
Right.
opposed to an immersive interactivity experience.
Right.
And I think that maybe there's some irony or
But,
backflow
Well,
towards
but-
programming that's just geared to watching.
Yeah, I think, and actually, when you look at the Create schedule, the majority of the Create programming are half-hour shows. And they're uninterrupted half-hour shows, 26, 27 minutes worth, that have strong content. And that's really what's, absolutely, I would agree that is a large part of what we've seen with the growth of our audience with that channel.
You think about like the World Cup, for example, and you talk about an event that literally, an hour and a half, 2-hour sporting event that literally has, one interruption for advertising in the middle. And so you do wonder as the model evolves, as things change, as there becomes more pressure from digital models in terms of being able to track impressions and potentially things like click-throughs or calls to action, if a traditional advertising and 30-second spot, if sponsorship comes in and has a role to play there, if there's going to be other things that will be experimented with in the broadcast space. It's a question, it's an age-old question though, and there's never a clear answer.
All right, well, we're just about out of time. Any last questions? Okay, very good. Well, thank you guys. That was really interesting, and thank you for your attention here at the end of the day.
Thank you, Tom.